Hi, my name is Nicholas Bethencourt.
And my name is Nina Bethencourt, and we are both actors here in Central Florida.
We have been studying with professional acting and singing coaches and learning from the available material by the great teachers of the past, such as Sanford Meisner, Uta Hagen, and Stanislavski.
We started this channel in order to share with other young aspiring actors out there some of the knowledge that we've acquired. But the real reason behind it is that we've seen lots of great acting classes for kids out there, but we've never seen any with the perspective of fellow young actors. We also get asked a lot of questions about how to handle stage fright. Because, let's be honest here, the idea of being on stage with all those eyes analyzing you can be pretty frightening, if not terrifying. But there are effective techniques on how to handle stage fright, and we're going to be talking about that on this course.
Another question we are asked a lot is, how do you cry on command? How can you bring those emotions into your character in front of so many people? And again, there are great techniques and methods to achieve those results. And we are going to be looking into them throughout this course as well, among many other important elements in life of a young actor. So welcome to Acting for Kids. Let's get started. Before we begin, we need to make sure that we all understand what is acting. So let's start there. Let's talk about what exactly is acting. Meisner described acting as behaving truthfully under imaginary circumstances.
Now, what does that mean exactly? Well, let's break it down. What does behaving truthfully mean? Behaving truthfully means reacting to different situations the way you would in real life.
Exactly. You are reacting to a made-up situation as if it was real. So now that we all know what acting is, let's talk about character breakdown and what are the steps you should take to create a character.
Now, this is the part where you really get to use your imagination. What makes a character believable? Well, it's the amount of emotional depth that you apply to it. So let's imagine for a moment that your grandmother just baked a beautiful vanilla cake stuffed with strawberries and cream and all covered on top with a chocolate coat and topped off with a beautiful frosting decor. Now let's imagine that your grandmother just made a bland white cake with nothing on it, just a big blob of cake. Which one would you rather eat? It's all the layers that you apply to the character that make it really interesting. So let's talk about the different basic layers that your character cake should have. To start off, you begin by asking, who am I? Where am I? What is my goal in the scene? And what was the moment before?
The first question you ask yourself is, who am I? Now, I'm sure you know who the real you is, but here we're talking about who your character is. By really diving into this question, your character becomes more intricate and real. Now, some questions you can ask to answer the big question of, who am I? Are questions like, what is my character's name? If your character doesn't have a written name in the script, you can make it up. Who are the character's parents? Were they strict or laid back? How did their parenting affect the character's behavior? What kind of childhood did the character have? A harsh and poor one, or a wonderful and lavish one?
Where is my character from? What country, state, city? What kind of financial state is my character in? Is it poor and starving on the streets, or is it a multi-millionaire living in a huge mansion? What are the character's favorite activities and hobby? Maybe it's really into soccer and archery, or maybe it's into painting and poetry. What are its pet peeves? Maybe it gets really bothered with noisy eaters. What kind of personality does your character have? Is it strong and independent, or is it shy and insecure? The list goes on and on and on. The more questions you ask, the more elaborate your character becomes. Now, all of these little things might seem unimportant at first, but just remember that it is a bunch of those small, tiny details and facts that come together to create the person that you yourself are today. So we can't make the little things irrelevant because they all come together in the long run to create the big picture.
Now let's move on to the question of, where am I? The setting of the scene or monologue is very important and makes your character and storyline even more realistic and vivid.
Begin by asking, where's the location of the scene? Let's say the scene takes place in a beautiful park in Washington, D.C. Next ask, what time is it? Perhaps it's 7 in the morning on July 12th, 1953. So, since it's 7 in the morning, maybe your character is still a little bit tired and wishing it could go back to bed. And since it's 1953, its mannerisms and way of life are going to be different than the ones you see today. But that goes into researching your character, which we'll talk about in a later episode. Then ask yourself, what temperature and climate is it? Since we said it's July, it's probably going to be pretty hot outside, so try to do things to try to reduce the heat that your character's taking in. Maybe you can fan yourself occasionally and find other ways to portray that heat.
Now let's ask the question of, what is my goal in this scene? The goal of your scene can be broken down into little parts. You have the main general goal of the scene, and then you have the smaller goals of every individual line. It's like taking a test. Your main goal is to get a good grade on the test, but every question is its own challenge.
Yeah, that's a good point. You need to set up the objective in order to find out how to deliver a line and/or scene with the correct intention. But we'll talk more about objectives in a later episode.
Now for the moment before. A very important question to ask while working a scene or a monologue is, what was the moment before?
What situation was your character in before the scene began? You can make up a little storyline. Maybe your character was coming home from a rough day at work and he had stepped on gum on his way back and he didn't have enough sleep the night before. So your character would probably not be very patient and he'd be a little frustrated. So this would create a very different mood for the scene versus him or her coming home from a wonderful day.
So to sum it up, layers are questions that we ask ourselves about our characters. So the more questions we ask, the more layers we get, and the more elaborate your character becomes.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We sincerely hope that you can take something from this video. Thank you.
See you next time.